Good afternoon to our viewers in Germany and good morning to our viewers in the United States. Hello, I'm Steve Sokol, the president of the American Council on Germany, and I'd like to thank you for joining us for our regular Kaffeepause. Today, I'm delighted to welcome two guests. I last spoke with them in late February, just days after the German election on February 23rd, and it seems appropriate to have them back again just a few days after the release of the coalition agreement, which provides some contours for the new government. Joining us is Klaus-Dieter Frankenberger. He's the former foreign editor of the Frankfurter Allgemeine Zeitung, and he's joining us from just outside of Frankfurt. Klaus-Dieter, thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you for having me. It's great to be back.
And also with us is Nadine Lindner. She's a correspondent with Deutschlandradio and based in Berlin. Nadine, herzlich willkommen.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks a lot. Good to be back.
So it is really great to see you both, and I want to thank you for making the time to talk with us again. I'd like to start with my typical Kaffeepause question about the political mood. So Nadine, let's start with you. What's the political mood in Berlin like now that there is a coalition agreement, and there's lots of speculation about who might do what in the government, but what's the atmosphere?
I think there are like two main characteristics that we see now. First, we are a little bit in an in-between, as we have the coalition contract, which is now signed, but we don't have a new government yet, because now the parties are asking their members, like the Social Democrats are asking their members for consent of that coalition contract. I don't really have doubts that the SPD, they will say yes to the new contract, but still there will be like more than a week of online consultations and also some meetings, party meetings. That CSU, the Bavarian part of the Christian Democrats, they already said yes, but also the CDU, they will have like a small party meeting to say yes to the contract. So we have that, and that brings some discussions, and that makes some of the persons pretty nervous, because now we already have discussions within the soon-to-be government about fundamental ideas that we find in the government, in the coalition contract, like about minimum wage. Now they're already, even before Friedrich Merz is elected as the new chancellor, we have discussions about the financing reservation, which means it's a clause that we see in the contract that says, well, these are our ideas, but if we do it, it depends if we have enough money for it. So the problem is, this is like, this is very difficult, because no one is really sure if like important project like the minimum wage, which is hugely important for the Social Democrats, will really happen if there are enough funds in the coalition contract, or also some questions on taxation reliefs, etc., etc. So I think the situation, the whole atmosphere is more nervous than I thought it would be. And the problem is there's like no euphoric moment that you usually feel when there's like a new government. I think not even the Christian Democrats are really euphoric about forming this next coalition, which is, to my view, is a problem, because it's going to make the whole business a lot more difficult.
I mean, maybe we can still wait for that euphoric moment when the new chancellor is elected and the new cabinet takes office, but I'm not necessarily going to hold my breath. I mean, it is interesting, just to back up a little bit in terms of the timeline. I guess the Social Democrats begin their sort of 10-day process tomorrow of checking with party members to get consent for the coalition agreement. So that'll take us to the 25th of April. The CDU, as you mentioned, will have a conference where its members will vote on this just after Easter. In some of the reporting, though, that I've seen, it seems as if there's also a bit of a generational difference. The Jusos are picking up on certain elements in the coalition agreement that they don't like, the Junge Union as well. Nadine, is that something that you're picking up on too?
Yeah, but I would say with the users and also the Junge Union, I wouldn't say it's a real huge problem. It's more or less something that I expected, because if you look at the traditions of German parties, in a lot of cases, you have those youth organizations that are a bit more radical, or they want to stick a bit more to the pure ideas, the pure ideology of parties. So if there's critique from their side, I wouldn't say it's a problem. It only gets a problem if it goes deeper into the party, and I don't see that yet in case of the SPD.
And Klaus-Dieter, let's bring you into the conversation. I'd love to hear if there's a similar or different mood in Frankfurt, obviously Germany's financial capital, and so lots of questions of economic concern at the moment. What's the mood in Frankfurt like?
I don't detect a dissimilar mood. I basically detect a mood that is the one Nadine described. The thing is basically, let's get over with it. Let's wave the others goodbye and have the new government start with business. It is not euphoric. It is not ecstatic. It's rather modest. And of course, the first criticism have been creeping in, or people from their various perspectives views this agreement as the good one, this is the bad one, and vice versa. Or it is not something that we have the first parades on the street of Frankfurt or to welcome the new coalition. The mood is rather sober, and this is probably well deserved because it's not a spectacular agreement, but the circumstances that the new partners will operate under are frightening in certain ways, or they have negotiated under the shadows of the Trump tariff madness. They have negotiated under the constant terror of witnessing from the distance the Russian terror in and against Ukraine, or the German economy is probably entering another bad year, or though the thing is are pretty difficult, and both partners have, in a certain sense, almost hypnotized themselves by saying, if the two of us will not achieve something, some good for the country, some good for the people, this may be the end of our center governments in Germany. And then you have the fanatics on the right are waiting on the sidelines. So this is a very special moment. The mood is, okay, let's start as soon as possible and deal with business, bring in a new team, and then we deal with Russia, with the US, with China, and with Europe, by the way.
I mean, I think that's an important point of sort of let's just get on with it. We've spent enough time focused on this, and there are so many other issues that are pending. It could, of course, take a few more weeks. It will take a few more weeks for the government to form. I think a lot of people were happy to see how quickly the coalition agreement came together. I think there were some that thought that having a coalition agreement in hand before Easter was incredibly ambitious. But given the timeline where we are right now, it looks as if the chancellor will be elected in early May. Were the two of you surprised at how quickly the coalition agreement came together? Nadine, let's start with you.
Yes and no. Well, if you compare it to other negotiation processes that we had seen in the past, I would say yes, they were quick. On the other hand, I would say, well, Friedrich Merz had a huge of high benchmarks that he pronounced before. Like he said, I want to be elected as a chancellor just right after Easter. The 23rd of April was always the aim for the election of the chancellor. Now they didn't really hit the spot, while now it's like a few days later. And plus, they said they want to have a short coalition contract. Now it's like the average length. And also they said, well, we want to have like very lean teams, just small teams negotiating. Now it was just, how can I say, the number of persons who were involved were just like what we had seen before. And also they said, well, we want to reduce the numbers of ministries, of ministers. Now it's even one more. So there were some benchmarks that especially the CDU set for themselves that they are not hitting.
And they have hundreds of commissions also, hundreds of commissions.
And also the problem, and I see one problem really in the coalition contract, if you read it, it's obvious that there is like no decision on important things. It's not only the finance side, it's also on some other points like, do we want to, what is happening like with the military? Do we want to draw young people to the military on an involuntary basis? It's not really clear what's going to happen. So there are like some open points that are already causing problems. So I see a huge risk that there will be, that it's not like the end of the debate, but that this contract is just the start of the debate. Given the international and also the internal problems with an AfD that is really behind, that is really chasing Friedrich Merz because of his decision to use the old elected Bundestag for changing the debt rules that we have, and also to generate a lot of new debt that can be used for like infrastructure, climate projects, etc., etc. To my view, it's a good idea to do that, to put the money into the Bundeswehr, to put the money into infrastructure. But in the election campaign, he always said something different. And now it's a breach of his word. So that is already, I think in the communication, he already made the first mistake.
So it seems as if Friedrich Merz has already broken some campaign promises, which undoubtedly we'll come back to in just a minute. But Nadine, you cover the AfD, and I just received a question from somebody who is curious about the relationship between the AfD and the CDU, given some of the latest polling numbers. Just over the weekend, there was a poll that was released that shows the AfD actually closing in on the CDU. The CDU has 25% support, the AfD 24% support. What, if anything, do you think does this mean for the new government?
Well, for the new government, it's a lot more pressure, especially for the Christian Democrats, CDU plus CSU. It's a huge pressure because they have some undealt strategic questions. Until now, there is like a non-cooperation clause that the CDU has given themselves on a party convention, which says, no, we don't work with the AfD. But it's not very the question of what cooperation means is not very detailed. So you already have seen in the end of January that CDU plus AfD were at least agreeing on the same idea in the Bundestag to limit migration, which caused a huge debate within the CDU. The AfD says we want to destroy the CDU. We want to become the new CDU, like the big new main player on the right-wing side of the political spectrum. And as we destroy the CDU, we are there to take their power in the Bundesländer, but also then later in the Bundestag. So for the CDU, it's really difficult to show that they are a pragmatic party that can govern, that must govern, that has to take compromises to govern because they cannot rule the country alone. But on the other hand, be seeable, be identifiable as a conservative source, as a conservative party. And this is until now a bit unsolved, and you can really see that within the CDU, they're really nervous.
Klaus-Dieter, I want to come back to the coalition agreement for just a moment. Nadine was talking about the fact that there were a number of issues that were kind of left open in the coalition agreement, and that some of those open points are already starting to cause some problems. The coalition agreement is also a bit shorter than they often are. I mean, often coalition agreements tend to be solid Arbeitspläne or work plans for the new government as it comes in. This coalition agreement is only 140 or so pages. What were some of the things that stood out to you as you sort of looked at the main points of the coalition agreement?
Are in the paper that I'm still associated with, the FAZ has a commentary this morning that basically says, tear it apart, start all over again within a week because you have made one mistake or failed in one crucial respect, and this is you have not set clear priorities. This criticism is somewhat fair and is somewhat not fair. I would think one cannot underestimate the pressure and the time pressure to reach this agreement and to form a new government, determined, strong, and able to take our forceful action and decisions. I think they want to get it over. Merz, as Nadine rightly said, has made, in my judgment, a couple of mistakes. His credibility is a little bit on the line. He has low approval ratings so far. And the only thing that can change is be in government. Once they are in government, you will see that the polls for the CDU and the CSU, the two in particular, will go up somewhat because they are the chancellor. They are now on television in a responsive function. I would say one also cannot underestimate the pressure that has been exerted from the United States in terms of the tariffs. I mean, the German economy is dependent on foreign trade. We all know that. You have a very graphic expression: if a problem reaches a fan, and this is now crunch time for Germany, for the German economy, the German model. I mean, being caught in between China, the U.S., and we have still the war in Russia, and I think they agree that there are that both sides have not gotten everything what they want. It's clear if you form a coalition, you have to compromise, and one must say one thing: the SPD, with just 16% of the vote 2 months ago, has maximized their political fortune, so to speak. It's almost unbelievable to me that they have the finance minister, the employment minister with the largest budget by far on the federal level. They have the defense portfolio, that the climate portfolio, and of course they didn't get the tax on wealthy income earners, high income earners, but they got a few other things like the minimum wage, and they're going to stick to it. One also should not forget, and Nadine alluded to this in her first response, two major obstacles out of the way, and which did not, and being successful also doesn't play too well for Friedrich Merz's foresight. I mean, they got out of the way with the debt brake, and a lot of people said you cannot finance a major increase of the budget for the armed forces, which are, by the way, in a dismal state, just by that you expect to get a higher growth rate. Will not be possible. So you have to lose the tax rate. Now it is as loosened that there's no upper limit. They can spend and spend and spend as much as they think it's necessary. And the second thing, a special fund also in the written into the Constitution to finance infrastructure projects. So these were two major things, and Merz campaigned doing against this. So his credibility on the line again. The Zelensky visit in the White House in February 28 changed a lot of things in the minds of Berlin policymakers. And this is the whole thing probably has started from there again. And it's new and it's not clear. I was surprised that the CDU just was happy to get the Commerce Department and didn't go for the Finance Department. Anyways, that's the way it is. Or maybe if we speak in a month, or Friedrich Merz will be sworn as a chancellor, or the new team is in the distributed to the various ministries, and then they start at work. The first priority items are migration, defense, the war, and the tariff. Tariff is unbelievably important thing.
I definitely want to come back to migration and defense in just a moment, because there were some interesting statements from Friedrich Merz about this over the weekend. But I do want to come back to this one issue. I mean, I think that relaxing or releasing the debt brake, focusing on the budget, creating the special fund, these were all things that probably made the coalition negotiation a little bit easier because it took some of that financing piece out of the discussion, and it was possible for the Christian Democrats and the Social Democrats to arrive at least a bit of a common denominator. But I remain somewhat concerned that both of you have indicated that there's not enough of what the priorities of this new government will be. And so, Nadine, I'm curious whether you share Klaus-Dieter's sentiment that a number of external factors, like Trump's posturing on Europe and threat of tariffs, as well as the ongoing war in Ukraine, as well as the state of the German economy, have really sort of been, in a sense, a catalyst that has pushed the Social Democrats and the Christian Democrats together to try to reach a coalition agreement quickly.
Yeah, the point is I'm also lacking a bit of new ideas. I have the feeling in the coalition contract they are not really like surprises. It's more or less what you would expect from a solid German government. But still, there are some small surprises. And maybe one is if we have a look at the text that is about the the transatlantic cooperation, because you can have the feeling that more or less nothing changes, because it said, well, the transatlantic partnership was always a huge success and we want to continue with it. And then, well, you see under new circumstances, what. But I don't have the feeling that, and it's a bit contradictory to my mind, that Friedrich Merz says on the one hand, oh, we had that speech of J.D. Vance at the Munich security meeting, the MSC in Munich, that changed everything. And now in that coalition contract, you don't really see a new tone towards the relationship with the US. You see it a bit in the relationship with China, because it's more, let's talk about de-risking, etc., etc. And then still, I mean, with the tariffs, it's not really a surprise that they come. And China might try to now reach a hand towards Europe. And now the German government goes more with the China strategy on a path where it's, oh, let's de-risk and let's focus on our own interests. Let's not see them anymore as a partner, or not as strong as a partner, but more as maybe as a threat or as a concurrent.
In other areas, though,
can I say something, Steve?
Yeah, let me just add one comment, because I think it might go in the direction that you're going in. But in other contexts, Friedrich Merz has talked about Germany needing to become more independent of the United States, which is a little bit of a change for somebody who has such a strong transatlantic background. Sorry, Klaus-Dieter, I just wanted to.
You were hitting my point right on, and this what seems to be a contradiction may actually go hand in hand. Yes, this was old-fashioned reaffirmation of the validity and the solidity and the future of the transatlantic relationship. This is what probably any German government had done in the circumstances of recent experience, and this is, I mean, Klingbeil from the SPD, Friedrich Merz, the stalwart Atlanticist. So Friedrich Merz for decades, Lars Klingbeil not so long, but they are Atlanticists. And they want to preserve this as much as possible. Being fully aware that, as someone said the other day, there's a new sheriff in town, there's a new sheriff in the White House, and who does stupid and crazy things all the time, and we are paying a price for that, both in security and in economic prosperity. And this we have to deal with. The independence line of Friedrich Merz, before he said it, or I think he said it on the eve of the election, surprised some, including myself, or I would have expected that he would say something about the line like of Macron, or strategic sovereignty. If not strategic autonomy, I would go for strategic sovereignty. This would develop. I think the policy decisions we will get at will all go in this direction, but hopefully in a transatlantic framework which allows at least a minimum of cooperation. This is what every German government would strive for, a minimum of cooperation, a minimum of reliability and stability when given that the challenges are so enormous and so plentiful and diverse.
Some have called it wishful thinking. Others have said it's probably an overly optimistic outlook. I sort of read it to be hoping for the best, but also expecting the worst as this new German government starts to position itself for the future. Coming back to something that Klaus-Dieter was talking about a little earlier, the Social Democrats were in a pretty strong negotiating position despite the worst election results in more than a century, and were able to get some good concessions in the coalition negotiations. As things look right now, it seems as if the Christian Democrats, the CDU, will have the chancellery as well as 7 ministries. The CSU will have 3 ministries, and the Social Democrats will have 5 pretty significant ministries. It looks like Lars Klingbeil will be the vice chancellor and that he'll head the finance ministry. It might be a little premature to talk about, all of the personnel going into the various ministries, but I know that, starting last week already, and certainly for the next couple of weeks, there's going to be a lot of buzz in Berlin about who gets what position and takes on which role. One of the things that struck me as a little bit surprising was that the Christian Democrats will get the Foreign Office for the first time in 60 years. This is quite a change. Do either of you have any sort of initial thoughts on the leadership at any of the various ministries?
Well,
just let me say one thing: the SPD will have 7 ministries, 7, not 5. Okay. So they have a huge chunk. But maybe I leave the word to Klaus-Dieter because you're more in the whole foreign policies debate. So maybe it's more interesting to have a look there.
Well, I don't know. I'm sitting here at the heart of it's the heart of Germany, but I don't have a crystal ball. What is going on in the minds of the actors in Berlin? I would think, if and when it was clear that Pistorius, so in other words, the SPD would keep the defense department, and the CDU was quite happy with having the SPD keeping the defense department, it is inevitable that you give the other ministry, the foreign, to a different party. Can't be held by one and only one. If I were Friedrich Merz, I would have done the same thing. First, if you have someone from your own group, it reduces policy competition. I mean, there's, of course, an institutional self-confidence that wants to manifest itself once in a while, but there's no policy competition. And you also can make sure that the rival in the other ministries doesn't shine too much, and doesn't take the limelight from you. Merz will concentrate, as I said earlier, and centralize the key dossiers in the chancellery: EU, Russia, the US, China, maybe a little bit the Middle East. But the 4 others are paramount and full important. Second, if you have something now with a Security Council, even if it's a baby Security Council, a council in the making, it also means there's another step for centralization. The step is not too big. It's not a huge stride, but that's that starts a process that eventually will lead to something of a capable and National Security Council. So you will then have someone in the Foreign Office who cannot be a superstar. It cannot be a superstar out of its own right. And the one name who's mentioned is Johann Wadefuhl, a member of the Bundestag and deputy group leader from Schleswig-Holstein, the northern state. He's not a heavy hitter. He's a fine person, but it's not a heavy hitter. And he has come to foreign affairs are not decades ago, I would say quite recently, 5, 6 years ago, he started to spend more time on foreign affairs. Though this would make sure that the directives will all come from the Chancellery, and this helps Merz.
Although with Vadapul, I mean, his name had circulated as a possible defense minister in previous CDU-led governments.
I don't think so.
I mean, I guess this sort of maybe begs a different question about this notion of a national security council and how that could look. I mean, that would obviously pull together a core representative, the Minister of the Interior, the Innenministerium, the Foreign Ministry, Defense, Economics, Finance, with the heads of the intelligence agencies. This is an idea that has been pushed a little bit by the Christian Democrats, and where there's a little bit more openness in the government. Nadine, have you heard anything about the National Security Council sort of taking shape under this new government?
Well, it's in the coalition contract. It's the plan is that it's positioned in the Chancellery, so which means in the office of Friedrich Merz, which gives him more influence and power. The SPD wasn't really a friend of this idea, but at last they agreed to it. There might be two more. Well, the ideas or the tasks of this National Security Council is to develop strategies, have solid or to analyze these different situations on a solid basis, and also develop on that basis a political will to do this or that, especially when they are like hard times. There might be plus two other like councils. It's one where also the Bundesländer are involved, and then one like National Crisis Council. But there I don't know a lot of, how can I say, that the shaping and also the members who are in there. I have the feeling that the National Security Council, plus the idea that the Foreign Office is now with the CDU, might reduce the number of voices, the number of like different political views that we have in the foreign policy. When we think back of Annalena Baerbock and Olaf Scholz, they had sometimes very different out views or very different views, like on the delivery of certain weapons to Ukraine, feminist foreign policy, whatever. I don't think that we will see this with the CDU-led Foreign Office. I don't know if it's gonna be Vadapul. I wouldn't be surprised if it's him, but like the Social Democrats, they will only present the persons for the ministries at the end of April, which means at the end of the party intern process that they are now joining. So it might be that we only, it might be that we still have to wait a few days or a few days with the other parties. I don't really know if they already have like a fixed schedule for presenting the persons.
I mean, as we said, I mean, this is all very speculative in terms of who exactly is going to do what. I just received a question from somebody asking whether someone like Norbert Röttgen could have a role in the foreign ministry. I mean, I think we're all wondering, who will take on which role. But I do want to come back to the point that you just made, Nadine, about defense and equipment. Over the weekend, Friedrich Merz said that Germany is prepared to send Taurus missiles to Ukraine as part of its efforts to help support Kyiv. And this is a break in the policy that Olaf Scholz had, where he refused to give these missiles to Ukraine. How is that resonating with people on the street and in government? I welcome comments from both of you on that.
Well, I would say a third. Excuse me, Nadine. I would say our people, a third of the electorate voted hard right against Germany's involvement one way or the other in military assistance to Ukraine. They are skeptical. The AfD is more pro-Putin. Sarah Wagenknecht's group which is not in the Bundestag, is pro-Putin, and the hard left has also some Putinistas in the party and in the Bundestag group. It's a courageous statement. He has said this before. When the towers issue was a hot issue last year and the year before, Friedrich Merz sometimes says things under the impression of an immediate development. And, the weekend was a heavy bombardment, terrible bombardment of our Ukrainian cities, or I would say it's terror against civilians. And this is his response. He re-uttered his readiness to deliver our cruise missiles of our medium to long range, that can reach medium to long range targets. I would say if the CDU has always said we will support Ukraine, and if it means something, then it means supplying our Ukraine with adequate weaponry. And I would say if Pistorius keeps the Defense Department, he has no qualms about that. He would agree. The ones in the SPD who are peaceniks, like the former group leader Mützenich, he has been kicked to the sidelines. They don't play as an important role as they did last time. I would think Lars Klingbein is someone, the co-party chairman, and probable finance minister would also agree. We have now reached a crucial phase in Russia's war against Ukraine, and with or without the United States, those in Europe, the group of those who are willing and able to do something must be willing and able to do something. And Germany is a crucial part. And having said before that it's necessary to bring in a new government, the Scholz government was at the end just sitting it out. And this can't continue. So if there's something which propels the whole process forward, it is also Russia and Ukraine. And let me say something to our listener, Norbert Röttgen. Norbert Röttgen is a smart guy. He's clever. He's well versed in foreign and security policy, particularly foreign. He is doing international stages easily, and capably, but he has one disadvantage. He also ran for party chairman twice against Friedrich Merz. Well, Friedrich Merz has a memory. And second, remember what I said, Friedrich Merz doesn't want to have a rival in the Foreign Office who may have as much glamour as himself. This is a difficult situation with Norbert Röttgen.
And plus, Klaus-Dieter and Stephen, there's like one other major disadvantage for Norbert Röttgen. He's also from the same Bundesland as Friedrich Merz, and the CDU. When the parties pick the persons for the ministries, it's not only about their performance and their knowledge, but it's also a question: where do they come from? To which side of the party, left or right, within the CDU do they belong? So there is also some kind of proports thinking when deciding for it. So for Norbert Röttgen, I would say it's not easy for him, because you have Friedrich Merz, who is coming from North Rhine-Westphalia. You have Carsten Linnemann coming from North Rhine-Westphalia, and some others. So that would be one point that is more a plus for Wadepfuhl because he is from another Bundesland. Maybe you can say, well, this is like stupid, but on the other hand, it's how stuff works here in Germany. I think for the SPD, they have a Niedersachsen problem, like Lower Saxony. This is the Bundesland where Lars Klingberg comes from, where Pistorius comes from. So they have like a bundle of people coming from there. And if you look at the Ukraine politics within the coalition contract, it's interesting because Germany still sticks to the idea that Ukraine becomes a NATO member, even though the US already said, no, we can't imagine this. They are promised support, substantial and reliable. This is what they said. And there's one interesting point because there's the vision for security guarantees that are given from Germany to the Ukraine, but not military. It only says material and like political. Mm-hmm. It's not really clear what they mean, but I have the feeling that in the coalition contract, it's also said that that Germany will support the reconstruction of Ukraine. There is not a word about like troops or military engagement within the peace-finding process in Ukraine.
Well, if I just add, Nadine, if they had stipulated in the contract, let's say we are willing and able to commission so many soldiers from the Bundeswehr for any kind of peace agreement, this would have helped those in the SPD who are strictly against this tremendously, I would say. Though I would say it's deliberately left open and left vague in a formulation.
But still we have a blank space there on a central question again. You know, we can have a whole collection of blank spaces.
So I mean, obviously, although there's a little bit of clarity because we now have the coalition agreement, there are lots and lots of open questions. Nadine, as you said at the very beginning, and that continues to make it interesting for us to try to figure out what's happening next. I know that we're running out of time, but I just wanted to bring up one other topic that we touched on very briefly earlier in the conversation, and that is immigration policy. There was a discussion over the weekend about whether or not border controls would be reintroduced once Friedrich Merz becomes chancellor. On the first day that he becomes chancellor, he had an interview in ARD and basically said that's essentially what it says in the coalition agreement. And since the CSU will have the Ministry of the Interior, the Innenministerium, I don't even need to give this order. Do the two of you think that it will really come to strong border controls almost immediately after Friedrich Merz becomes chancellor?
I mean, we already have border controls, like on more or less every border, not permanent. Sometimes they are moving. So sometimes you might enter Germany like through landwise and you won't see it, but they are there. So it might be that they will be like even the number of police officers will be higher, but there is like one point that is going to be really interesting. The question if we deport asylum, if we don't allow asylum seekers into the country. This is one point that the CDU wanted to like keep them away at the border already, and the SPD said, no, we can't do it. Now you have a compromise in the coalition contract that says we will restrict the entry of those persons in coordination with our neighboring countries. No one really knows what does coordination mean. But I think in the point of deportations, it might become interesting because that now shifts from the Bundesländer responsibility to like the national level, which might make things easier. And also the SPD emphasis that we need to strengthen the departments or the, how can I say, the offices that are responsible for Asylanträge, Klaus-Dieter.
Applications for asylum applications.
Yeah, asylum applications, to just have more people working in those offices to be a bit faster with those asylum applications.
Well, I would just simply add that the CDU and Friedrich Merz will learn that our migration policy will not be the big thing. They had told the public in the campaign that this might be our on the horizon. It will be step by step, but also it's true, it will be step by step become more restrictive in terms of our pushing back asylum applicants. The German word is in Abstimmung mit third countries, let's say about Austria. If an asylum seeker comes, says, hello, I want to apply for asylum, and the German border guards say, no, go back to Austria. Will the Austrians take it? Take these persons, which they actually are obliged to do, because this is a EU member, so he has already entered the EU. It's a safe country. It's a lot of complicated things, and the SPD has done something to tighten the screws, and this will continue. My whole thing is that expectations will be spectacular soon coming into the new government. And if I have already a final word, I would also say, please, we should not forget the outgoing government, what the outgoing government experienced on February 24, Russia's invasion of Ukraine. It was a couple of weeks after entering the government. In other words, what you agree on in a book size contract, maybe, as we say in German, Makulatur the next day, and we start from scratch all over again. Politically, militarily, security, economically, who knows?
Well, herzlichen Dank to both of you. Nadine, many, many thanks. Klaus-Dieter, many, many thanks to you as well. It's always great to talk to the two of you, even if we don't always have as much clarity as we would like. But I think it's been great to have your help in sort of understanding what some of the current trends in German politics are, and for pointing out some of the things that we should be watching in the days and weeks to come. So many, many thanks for joining us once again for this edition of the Kaffeepause.
Vielen Dank.
Thanks. Bye-bye. Have a nice day. Ciao.
Bye-bye. Alles Gute.